The morning sun shone brightly over the town as families started to gather outside the local high school. The air was filled with laughter, chatter, and the occasional squeal of excitement from younger children. Parents were adjusting caps and gowns on nervous students, snapping pictures and trying to calm jitters before the big ceremony began. Everyone seemed happy, full of anticipation for the milestone they were about to witness. Among the crowd, one man moved more quietly, almost blending into the background. He wore simple clothes, neat and unassuming, with a small pin on his jacket that hinted at a proud past. His steps were steady, measured, but there was a light in his eyes, a sense of purpose in being there. He made his way toward the entrance, glancing around at families greeting one another, students taking selfies, and staff members bustling about to make sure everything was ready. Despite the cheerful chaos, he carried himself with calm dignity. This man was a veteran. He had served his country for many years, faced challenges that most people could hardly imagine, and returned home with memories both proud and painful. Today, he wasn't thinking about medals or missions. He was thinking about family. He had come to see a loved one walk across the stage, to witness a moment that was supposed to be full of joy and pride. As he stepped inside the auditorium, the room suddenly felt different. Rows of chairs were neatly lined up. A stage adorned with banners awaited the graduates, and teachers and staff were moving quickly to organize last-minute details. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the decorations, the banners congratulating the graduates, and the nervous energy that seemed to hum in the air. He paused near the reserved seating section, hoping to find the family he had come to support, but a staff member noticed him standing there and quickly approached. "Excuse me, sir," the woman said politely, though her tone carried a hint of concern. "You can't be here. This section is reserved." She gestured toward the exit, assuming he had no right to be in the ceremony. The man looked at her, calm and respectful, his hands relaxed at his sides. He nodded slightly. "I'm here to see my family graduate," he said quietly, his voice steady. "I'm a veteran and my loved one is one of the students." The staff member hesitated, uncertain how to respond. She wasn't trying to be rude, only following the rules. She looked around for backup, hoping someone would clarify the situation. A few moments passed and the man remained patient, understanding that the misunderstanding was not personal. Still, a sense of unease began to spread through him. He had faced countless difficult situations in his life, but being asked to leave, a graduation ceremony where he had every right to be felt strange and humbling. Nearby, some students noticed the interaction. They whispered to each other, glancing curiously at the man who was being asked to leave. A few parents also turned to see what was happening, sensing the tension in the air. The veteran, aware of the attention but choosing not to react, simply stood there maintaining his composure. He knew that losing his temper or showing frustration would not solve anything. Patience and dignity had always guided him, and he would rely on them now. He took a deep breath and looked around again, trying to spot the graduate he had come to support. There was a young man standing near the stage, adjusting his gown and chatting nervously with friends. The veteran felt a surge of pride. This was the reason he was here, the reason he had traveled and taken time out of his day. He wanted to be there for that moment, to silently show that family and love could stand strong even in small acts of presence. The staff member returned with another colleague, and together they explained that the area was strictly for immediate family and guests who had been pre-registered. The veteran listened politely, nodding as they spoke. He understood their concern for order, but he could not help the twinge of disappointment that ran through him. He had served his country, had faced life-threatening situations, and now found himself being questioned in a school auditorium, a place meant to celebrate achievement and joy. Around him, the audience continued to settle. Chairs creaked as parents shifted, students whispered, and teachers made final announcements. The veteran stood quietly, unbothered by the movement but acutely aware of the eyes that occasionally glanced in his direction. Some were curious, some were sympathetic, and some simply did not notice him at all. Despite the mix of reactions, he remained composed, his focus on the one reason he had come. After a few minutes, a young teacher approached him, sensing that the situation required careful handling. She smiled gently, trying to ease the tension. "I'm sorry for the confusion," she said softly. "Can you tell me who you're here to support?" The veteran provided the name, and her eyes widened slightly in recognition. She realized immediately that this was not just any visitor. She had heard about his service, his background, and the family connection. Understanding his role and significance, she quickly assured him that he could stay and be seated where he belonged. The veteran thanked her quietly, maintaining his calm demeanor. He moved toward the reserved area, greeted by the warm, relieved smiles of the family he had come to support. He took a seat, feeling a mix of relief and pride. Around him, the room was buzzing with energy, the ceremony about to begin, and the veteran settled in, ready to witness the moment he had traveled for. Though the morning had started with an unexpected challenge, it was now shaping into the meaningful experience he had hoped for. As the graduates lined up and the music began to play, the veteran watched closely. His eyes were steady, but his heart swelled with emotion. Each name called, each step across the stage carried a deeper significance. He thought of the many years he had dedicated to serving others, the sacrifices made, and the hope that small gestures of support could mean so much. In that moment, surrounded by celebration, he realized that patience, dignity, and a quiet presence could make even the most difficult moments meaningful. The audience clapped and cheered, the graduates smiled broadly, and the veteran remained seated, fully engaged. He was here, not just as a witness, but as a symbol of commitment, love, and respect. And though the morning had begun with a misunderstanding, it was clear that this day would be remembered, not for the brief moment of tension, but for the pride, joy, and human connection that followed. The veteran's journey to this point, the challenges faced, and the quiet strength he displayed had made his presence here even more significant. He was ready for the celebration to continue, eager to share in the joy of the graduate he had come to honor. The auditorium was buzzing with quiet excitement as the ceremony began to unfold. Students stood in neat lines, whispering nervously to one another, while teachers gave last-minute instructions. Parents shuffled in their seats, adjusting cameras and phones to capture the moment. The veteran sat quietly, his hands folded on his lap, observing the scene around him with patience and calm. The earlier misunderstanding with the staff had faded slightly, but he remained aware of the curious glances from nearby attendees. The staff members who had initially asked him to leave now lingered nearby, exchanging glances and murmuring to each other. Some looked embarrassed, realizing they might have made a mistake, while others tried to focus on their responsibilities, hoping to maintain order as the ceremony continued. The veteran noticed the tension in the room, but he did not let it distract him. He knew that keeping calm and composed was the best way to handle the situation. As the first graduate was called to the stage, the veteran's eyes followed every movement carefully. He watched the young students step forward, shake hands with the principal, and receive their diplomas. Each name called brought applause, cheers, and a sense of accomplishment. Families clapped proudly, capturing photos and videos, while students smiled with relief and excitement. The veteran felt a mix of pride and nostalgia, thinking about his own journey and the challenges he had faced in his life. While the ceremony continued, the staff members discussed quietly among themselves. One of them whispered, "I think we may have misjudged that gentleman. He seems important." Another nodded, glancing toward the veteran. "Yes, he looks like he's here for someone close, but I'm not sure. Should we check again?" The conversation was hushed, but the veteran could sense their uncertainty. Despite the awkwardness, he remained silent, letting the staff figure things out without causing any further disturbance. Around him, other audience members began to notice the situation as well. A few students whispered to each other, pointing discreetly at the veteran. Parents turned their heads, curious about the older man who had been asked to leave earlier. Some recognized the small pin on his jacket and nodded subtly, a silent sign of respect. The veteran, aware of the attention, maintained his dignity and calm. He had faced far more intense situations in his life, and this moment, though uncomfortable, did not shake him. The graduate the veteran had come to support was called to the stage next. The young man's face was a mix of excitement and nervousness as he walked forward. The veteran felt a surge of pride, knowing that this was the moment he had been waiting for. As the graduate shook hands with the principal and received the diploma, the veteran clapped quietly, his eyes shining with emotion. It was a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of love, dedication, and support. Some staff members approached the veteran again, this time with more understanding. "I'm sorry for the earlier confusion," one said softly. "We didn't realize you were here to support a family member. You can stay where you are." The veteran nodded, acknowledging their apology with grace. He did not dwell on the incident, choosing instead to focus on the ceremony and the graduate he had come to honor. As the ceremony progressed, the veteran observed the audience around him. Families laughed, students cheered, and teachers smiled proudly. The atmosphere was filled with joy, yet the veteran's presence added a quiet, profound sense of respect. People began to realize that his calm demeanor and quiet attention were not just ordinary. They reflected a life of discipline, service, and sacrifice. Suddenly, a few more staff members moved closer to the veteran, whispering among themselves. Their expressions showed a mix of curiosity and concern. They were trying to figure out who he was and why he carried such a strong presence without saying much. The veteran, aware of their attention, did not feel threatened. He understood that people often misjudge based on appearances, and he had learned long ago to handle such moments with patience. Some of the students began to notice the subtle tension in the room. They whispered to each other, wondering why the veteran had been asked to leave and why the staff seemed uneasy now. A few brave students turned to their parents, quietly asking questions. The parents, unsure of the details, simply nodded and whispered that it would be resolved. The veteran, seeing the curiosity around him, smiled faintly. He knew that the moment would soon take a turn that no one would forget. As the ceremony moved forward, the veteran's focus remained on the graduates. Each student crossing the stage reminded him of the value of dedication, hard work, and perseverance. He thought about his own life, the challenges he had faced in service, and the importance of being present for the people you care about. Despite the earlier discomfort, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was why he had come, to support, to witness, and to honor a loved one. The staff, still murmuring among themselves, seemed to grow more aware of the veteran's significance. They realized that he was not just any visitor. There was a story behind his calm, dignified presence. Some of them exchanged knowing glances, silently acknowledging that they had misjudged him. The veteran noticed the shift but did not react outwardly. He continued to sit quietly, observing the ceremony and quietly enjoying the moment. As more graduates received their diplomas, the energy in the room remained high. The veteran clapped quietly each time, his hands steady and controlled. His eyes followed the students with genuine pride, not just for the graduates but for the spirit of achievement that filled the room. Parents and students began to sense the veteran's quiet strength, the calm authority that seemed to radiate from him. It was impossible not to notice, even in a crowd full of excitement. The young graduate whom the veteran had come to support had now returned to his seat, smiling broadly and chatting with friends. The veteran felt a quiet joy knowing that he had been there for this important moment. He realized that sometimes being present was the most powerful gesture of all. The ceremony continued, filled with applause, cheers, and the joyful sounds of celebration. As the morning moved toward its midpoint, the veteran reflected on the events that had unfolded. Being asked to leave had been uncomfortable, but it had also reminded him of the importance of patience and dignity. He had handled the situation with calm, and now he could fully enjoy the ceremony. Around him, people were starting to recognize, not just the graduates, but also the quiet presence of someone who had dedicated his life to service and who had come simply to support a loved one. The veteran's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden hush in the auditorium. Something had changed in the air, a subtle shift that made people turn their heads and look toward the entrance. Whispers spread quickly, curiosity rising. The veteran noticed it too, his instincts alert but composed. He had a feeling that the next moment would bring something extraordinary, something that would leave everyone in the room amazed and inspired. And as he watched, he realized that this ceremony was about to become unforgettable in a way no one had expected. A sudden shift in the atmosphere caught everyone's attention. The music in the auditorium seemed to fade, replaced by a quiet murmur of curiosity. Heads turned toward the entrance as a group of men in uniform began to walk down the aisle. They moved with purpose, their posture straight, their steps measured and confident. The audience fell silent, the chatter stopping abruptly. It was clear that these were not ordinary visitors. Each man wore a navy blue uniform adorned with badges, insignias, and the unmistakable markings of U.S. Navy SEALs. The veteran's eyes widened slightly, a mixture of recognition and surprise crossing his face. These were his brothers in arms, his teammates from years of service. Their presence was not casual. It was deliberate, a silent message of support and respect. As they moved closer, the audience began to murmur again, whispers spreading like wildfire. People exchanged glances, unsure of what was happening but sensing that this was something extraordinary. The staff members who had initially asked the veteran to leave were now frozen in place, their expressions a mix of shock and awe. They had never expected such an entrance, and the gravity of the moment slowly began to settle in. The SEAL's steps were quiet yet commanding, each movement precise and disciplined. There was no aggression, only a powerful presence that demanded attention and respect. Some parents instinctively stood, unsure whether to sit or acknowledge the newcomers. Students craned their necks, eyes wide with curiosity. The veteran remained seated for a moment, taking it all in. His heart swelled with emotion as he realized that his old teammates had come not just to honor him, but to honor the moment and the family he had come to support. It was a gesture that spoke volumes, a reminder of loyalty, camaraderie, and the bonds formed in service. The SEALs reached the front of the auditorium, their presence commanding a silent respect. One of them stepped forward, glancing briefly at the veteran before nodding subtly. It was a gesture of recognition, a quiet acknowledgement of shared history and sacrifice. The audience could feel the tension in the air shift from curiosity to admiration. There was an energy in the room now that had not been there before, a sense that something meaningful was unfolding. The staff members slowly approached, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Sir, can you explain who these men are?" one of them asked hesitantly, her voice betraying a mixture of nervousness and respect. The veteran remained calm, his voice steady as he replied, "These are my teammates. They are here to support me and my family." The words were simple, yet they carried weight, resonating through the room. The staff realized they were in the presence of people who had dedicated their lives to service, and any further attempt to question them seemed insignificant. As the SEALs positioned themselves near the reserved seating area, the atmosphere shifted completely. The crowd sensed the significance of the moment, the respect that had silently been demanded by these men who had faced unimaginable challenges together. The graduates paused, some staring in disbelief, others whispering excitedly to their neighbors. Parents raised their phones trying to capture the moment, but it was clear that no photograph could fully convey the gravity and emotion in the room. The veteran stood slowly, a quiet dignity radiating from him. He looked at his old teammates and then at the family member he had come to support. There was a silent exchange, a recognition of shared understanding and loyalty. The SEALs nodded again, a gesture that said more than words could ever express. They were there not to disrupt but to honor, to stand as a testament to the veteran's life of service and the values he had upheld. Some of the students began to whisper among themselves, realizing that they were witnessing something truly special. A few parents leaned toward one another, speaking in hushed tones about the honor and discipline represented by the SEALs. The staff, now fully aware of the veteran's importance and the significance of the moment, stepped back, allowing the scene to unfold naturally. There was a collective understanding that this was not just a graduation ceremony anymore. It had become a moment of respect, recognition, and inspiration. The veteran's eyes scanned the room, taking in the reactions around him. The SEAL's presence had transformed the atmosphere completely. People who had been uncertain or skeptical now looked on with admiration and reverence. There was a sense of awe, a feeling that something rare and unforgettable was happening right before their eyes. The veteran felt a quiet pride not just for himself, but for the bonds that had brought these men together. Bonds forged through years of shared trials and unwavering loyalty. One of the SEALs approached the staff, speaking quietly but with authority. He explained the veteran's history, his service, and his importance to the community. The staff listened, their faces gradually softening from confusion to understanding. It became clear that the earlier misunderstanding was trivial compared to the significance of the people now present. The audience, catching snippets of the conversation, began to whisper in appreciation and respect. The veteran returned to his seat, feeling a wave of relief and emotion. The SEAL stood nearby, silent yet commanding, a living reminder of honor, service, and loyalty. The family member he had come to support looked at him with admiration, realizing the depth of what was unfolding. The moment was no longer about rules or seating arrangements. It was about respect, recognition, and human connection. As the ceremony continued, the graduates received their diplomas with renewed energy and excitement. The audience clapped, cheered, and celebrated, but now there was an added layer of reverence. People understood that they were witnessing not just a ceremony, but a moment that symbolized courage, dedication, and honor. The veterans' calm presence, supported by the SEALs, had transformed an ordinary graduation into a powerful, unforgettable experience. The staff, having regained their composure, moved discreetly to continue managing the event, but their focus had shifted. They were no longer the authority in the room. The SEALs' presence had redefined the space. The audience followed suit, allowing the moment to unfold naturally, their admiration quietly evident in smiles, glances, and respectful applause. The veteran's thoughts drifted briefly to his past missions, the challenges he had faced, and the people he had served alongside. He realized that life had brought him to this moment, not by chance, but through dedication, integrity, and relationships that endure beyond service. The presence of the SEALs was more than a reunion. It was a testament to the bonds formed in the toughest circumstances, and the way those bonds could continue to shape moments long after the uniform was hung up. The ceremony proceeded, but the audience remained captivated. Conversations had quieted, cameras were lowered, and attention was fully on the unfolding scene. The SEALs, standing proudly yet unobtrusively, reminded everyone present of sacrifice, discipline, and respect. The veteran, seated among them, felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had come to support a family member, and in doing so, had witnessed a moment that would be remembered by everyone in the room for years to come. As the final graduates prepared to receive their diplomas, the veteran glanced once more at the SEALs. Their presence had turned a moment of tension into a celebration of honor, respect, and human connection. The audience understood it too, and the energy in the room reflected admiration and inspiration. This was more than a graduation. It was a moment where courage, dignity, and loyalty converged, leaving an impression that no one would ever forget. The veteran sat quietly, proud and content, ready to see the rest of the ceremony unfold with the weight of history, friendship, and respect surrounding him. The room remained silent for a few moments, the weight of what had just happened settling over everyone. The SEALs stood proudly near the reserved seating area, their presence commanding respect without a word. The veteran felt a deep sense of connection and pride, seeing the men who had shared some of the toughest experiences of his life, now standing as silent guardians of this special moment. He had never imagined that a graduation ceremony would become such a meaningful event, but the arrival of his old teammates had changed everything. The audience began to realize the depth of the moment. Parents glanced at one another, some with tears forming in their eyes as they tried to understand the significance of the uniforms, the disciplined posture, and the quiet authority of the SEALs. Students whispered to each other, sensing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The energy in the room was no longer simply excitement about diplomas and caps. It had transformed into reverence, respect, and a shared appreciation for courage and sacrifice. One of the SEALs stepped forward, approaching the staff with a calm but firm presence. He spoke quietly, explaining the veteran's history and service, the contributions he had made, and the significance of his presence at the ceremony. The staff listened intently, some nodding in understanding, others blinking in surprise. They realized that the man they had earlier asked to leave was not just any visitor, but a hero who had dedicated years of his life to serving his country. The earlier misunderstanding seemed trivial now, almost inconceivable. The veteran returned his attention to the ceremony, feeling a mix of pride, relief, and gratitude. He watched his family member, who had been called to the stage again, smile nervously but confidently. The graduate waved briefly, catching the veteran's eye, and the veteran nodded subtly in encouragement. It was a quiet exchange, filled with emotion and meaning, yet so simple that it could easily have gone unnoticed by those who weren't paying close attention. Around him, the audience began to engage more fully with the unfolding moment. Parents and students clapped with renewed vigor, their attention drawn not just to the graduates but also to the quiet dignity of the veteran and the commanding presence of the SEALs. Some stood to get a better view, while others leaned forward in their seats, captivated by the story that seemed to be unfolding before them. Whispers spread throughout the auditorium, with phrases like, "Look at him," and "He served our country," passing from one person to another. The staff members who had initially asked the veteran to leave now felt a mixture of embarrassment and admiration. They had misjudged him based on appearances, a reminder that even in seemingly simple situations, assumptions can lead to mistakes. They watched as the SEALs conveyed honor and respect without saying much, realizing that the actions and presence of these men communicated more than words ever could. It was a lesson in humility and understanding, one that would likely stay with them long after the ceremony ended. The veteran noticed the shift in energy around him. Where there had been tension and misunderstanding, now there was respect, curiosity, and admiration. Students were quietly discussing what they were seeing, parents were exchanging nods of recognition, and staff members had stepped back to allow the moment to unfold naturally. The veteran felt a sense of calm satisfaction. He had faced countless difficult situations in his life, but this moment, quiet, dignified, and meaningful, was unlike any he had experienced before. As the ceremony continued, the graduates approached the stage one by one. The veteran clapped for each of them, his applause steady and heartfelt. When the family member he had come to support reached the stage, he felt a swell of emotion. The young graduate shook hands with the principal, received the diploma, and turned to wave at the veteran. The veteran's eyes glistened slightly, his pride and love evident even in the calm expression on his face. The SEALs stood nearby, their presence both protective and symbolic, reinforcing the respect and honor of the moment. After the graduate returned to his seat, the veteran leaned slightly to acknowledge the SEALs, who nodded in return. There was a silent understanding, a shared recognition of the bonds forged in service and the unspoken support that had carried them through challenges. The audience noticed this interaction, some whispering to each other about the meaning of loyalty, friendship, and sacrifice. The quiet human connection between the veteran and the SEALs became the heart of the ceremony, an invisible thread linking past service to the present celebration. The staff, seeing the impact of the SEALs and the veteran, began to relax. They returned to their duties, but there was a newfound respect in the way they moved through the room. They understood that they were now part of a larger story, one that went beyond the logistics of a graduation ceremony. Their respect for the veteran and the men standing beside him had grown, and their earlier mistakes seemed like a distant memory. The audience remained engaged, their energy transformed from casual excitement to a mixture of awe, appreciation, and inspiration. Parents whispered stories to each other about service and dedication. Students reflected on the courage and integrity they were witnessing, and the veteran sat quietly, absorbing it all. It was a moment that transcended the usual proceedings of a graduation, becoming a testament to human connection, respect, and the power of presence. The veteran's thoughts drifted to his past, the missions he had undertaken, the people he had served with, and the challenges he had faced. He realized that life had brought him here not just to celebrate a graduation, but to demonstrate the values he had lived by: courage, loyalty, dignity, and patience. The SEAL's presence amplified that message, reinforcing the idea that honor and respect can create moments that leave a lasting impact on everyone present. The ceremony continued smoothly, the graduates receiving their diplomas one after another, but the energy in the room had changed. The audience's attention had shifted to the deeper significance of the moment, and even casual observers could feel the importance of what was unfolding. The veteran's presence, coupled with the support of the SEALs, had transformed a simple event into a powerful, human-centered experience that no one would forget. As the final graduates were called, the veteran's gaze remained steady, filled with pride and love. The family member he had come to honor stepped forward, the young graduate's face shining with accomplishment and joy. The veteran clapped quietly but wholeheartedly, his eyes meeting the graduates with a silent message: "Well done, you've made us proud." The SEALs remained nearby, standing as symbols of honor and loyalty, reinforcing the profound sense of respect that had taken over the room. The audience erupted in applause, some standing, others cheering, and the veteran felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The ceremony had become more than a celebration of academic achievement. It had become a moment of human connection, respect, and recognition. The presence of the SEALs, the dignity of the veteran, and the joy of the graduates had created a story that everyone in the room would remember for years to come. As the applause continued, the veteran allowed himself a quiet smile. He had come to support a loved one, but he had witnessed something far greater, a lesson in respect, honor, and the power of human connection. Around him, people were inspired, moved, and reflective. The SEALs, having fulfilled their silent duty, stood as a reminder that courage, loyalty, and dignity can create moments that touch the hearts of many. And in that auditorium, on a day meant for celebration, a quiet but unforgettable story had unfolded, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. The ceremony was nearing its end, and the atmosphere in the auditorium was filled with a mix of joy, pride, and reflection. Graduates were seated after receiving their diplomas, talking excitedly with friends and sharing smiles with their families. The veteran sat quietly, observing everything around him with a sense of deep satisfaction. The earlier tension had completely faded, replaced by a warmth that filled the room. His presence, along with the SEALs who had subtly positioned themselves nearby, had left a lasting impression on everyone. The audience's focus shifted from the graduates to the veteran and the SEALs, as people began to understand the significance of the moment. Conversations softened to whispers of admiration. Parents leaned toward each other, sharing thoughts on the respect and discipline displayed by the SEALs. Students who had been nervous and excited just minutes earlier now felt inspired, witnessing a display of loyalty, courage, and human connection that went far beyond the usual graduation ceremony. The veteran's family member, seated nearby, glanced at him with quiet gratitude. The young graduate's eyes shone with appreciation and pride, not only for their achievement but for the presence of someone who had faced so much and still chose to be there in support. It was a reminder that acts of love and dedication could be quiet yet incredibly powerful. The veteran nodded subtly at the graduate, a small gesture of acknowledgement that carried profound meaning. As the ceremony reached its final moments, the principal stepped forward to give a closing speech. Their voice filled the auditorium, speaking of accomplishments, future aspirations, and the importance of perseverance. But as they continued, it became clear that the presence of the veteran and the SEALs had added an unexpected layer to the message. Words about courage, integrity, and dedication resonated more deeply with the audience now. The room felt alive with inspiration, the kind that leaves people reflecting long after the event ends. The staff, having regained their composure, continued to manage the ceremony, but there was a noticeable shift in their demeanor. Their earlier error in judgment was now replaced with respect and understanding. They moved quietly, ensuring that the event continued smoothly, while giving space for the significance of the veteran's presence to be fully appreciated. Some glanced discreetly at him, nodding in silent acknowledgement of the story that had unfolded. The SEALs remained composed, standing with quiet dignity. Their presence had been commanding yet unobtrusive, offering support without overshadowing the graduates. They were a symbol of discipline, loyalty, and service, and the audience could not help but feel the weight of their silent message. People whispered among themselves, recognizing the extraordinary nature of what had occurred. The SEALs had arrived to honor a veteran, but in doing so they had uplifted the entire room. The veteran allowed himself a moment to reflect. Life had brought him to this point, from the trials and challenges of service to this quiet but meaningful celebration. The presence of his old teammates reminded him of shared experiences, of loyalty and trust that transcended time. He felt a profound sense of gratitude, not only for the support of the SEALs but also for the opportunity to witness the success of his family member. It was a moment that connected past sacrifices with present achievements, a celebration of both dedication and love. As the graduates and audience began to prepare for the final recessional, the veteran stood quietly, offering his attention and encouragement to everyone around him. Students waved, friends hugged, and parents clapped enthusiastically. The veteran's calm presence served as a grounding force, reminding people of the importance of patience, dignity, and respect. The SEALs remained nearby, vigilant but unobtrusive, reinforcing the atmosphere of honor and admiration. When the graduates began to exit the stage and move toward their families, The veteran's family member approached him. The young graduate embraced him briefly, a quiet exchange of pride and gratitude passing between them. The veteran smiled softly, feeling a sense of fulfillment that words could not fully capture. He had come to support a loved one, and in doing so, he had become part of a moment that would be remembered by many. The audience began to stand, clapping and cheering, as the final graduates made their way out. The applause was heartfelt, a mixture of celebration and respect. People turned to glance at the veteran and the SEALs, acknowledging their presence with admiration. It was clear that the room had witnessed something remarkable, a story of courage, dedication, and human connection that went far beyond the ordinary ceremony. The SEALs quietly prepared to leave, their mission complete. One of them gave a subtle nod to the veteran, who returned the gesture with a small appreciative smile. The audience watched as they exited with the same calm precision with which they had entered. Their departure left a lingering sense of awe, a reminder of the extraordinary events that had taken place within the walls of the auditorium. As the final echoes of applause faded, the veteran took a deep breath and looked around the room one last time. He saw families embracing, graduates laughing, and staff members quietly resuming their work, now with a newfound understanding. The morning had begun with confusion and tension, but it had ended with pride, celebration, and a profound sense of connection. The presence of the SEALs had transformed the experience, leaving a lasting impression that everyone would carry with them. Walking toward the exit, the veteran felt a mixture of pride and contentment. He had been part of a story that went beyond the ordinary, a story of honor, respect, and human connection. The graduate he had come to support walked alongside him, excitedly recounting moments from the ceremony. The veteran listened, smiling quietly, aware that the memories made today would last a lifetime. Outside, the sun continued to shine brightly, casting a warm glow over the school grounds. Families gathered for photos. Laughter echoed through the air, and the graduates celebrated with friends. The veteran stood for a moment, taking it all in, reflecting on the unexpected journey that had unfolded within the walls of the auditorium. What had begun as a simple act of support had become a story of dignity, loyalty, and the extraordinary power of presence. The day would be remembered, not only for the achievements of the graduates, but for the quiet, profound lessons in respect, courage, and human connection. The veteran's journey, supported by his SEAL teammates, had turned an ordinary graduation into an unforgettable experience. It was a story of inspiration, a reminder that even small acts of presence and respect can create lasting impact. And as the veteran and the graduate walked away from the ceremony, both felt the quiet joy of having shared something truly remarkable, a memory that would remain vivid in their hearts forever.